I'm Brian Van, Sportbike and today we're going to talk about the Dynojet quick shifter. I'm going to show you how to install it on a 2015 through 18 Yamaha R3. Okay, so you've decided you want to add a quick shifter to your sport bike. What do we need to do? Well, let's use this bike as an example, Yamaha R3. You go to the R3 listing on our website and we have the Power Commander listing, and underneath that we have any of the accessories that are available for it, what they would be used for. So for quick shifting, everything always begins with the PCV. You have to have the Power Commander in order to even consider adding quick shift. On a bike like the R3, as we spell out in our listing for it, all you need to do to enable quick shift on this bike is to simply add a quick shift sensor. Some of the other motorcycles out there have different levels of requirements. You may need to add additional modules in order to get the quick shift enabled, plus the quick shift sensor. Next up, the quick shift sensor currently is available in 3 variants. The one I'm holding is the latest and greatest. This is their dual contact sensor. It can be a push, it can be a pull, it can be both. We're going to use that for the R3. We also have a push sensor or a pull sensor only. Those are still currently available, and you would use those in applications like, let's say you have an R6 and you know that your GP shift, you're committed to it, that's what you've been using. You determine would you need a push or a pull, and you order the appropriate one and you'll be good to go. Shift rod length is critical as well to get this installed, and we see this so many times where people will order just a sensor making assumptions and it doesn't turn out the way they plan. They find out they need some of the universal rods. So before you order anything, let's go through all these steps, identify the modules you're going to need, get those added to the order, and then the sensor and the shift rod. Take a look at your bike. Do I have aftermarket or OEM rear sets? Odds are if you're doing a quick shifter, you either are going to install or have already installed aftermarket rear sets. If that is in fact the case, there's a strong possibility your shift rod is no longer the same length as the OEM shift rod. In our Dynojet Power Commander listings, you'll note that for, once again, the hardcore sport bikes, we have called out which one of the universal shift rods would be necessary. For example, with this R3, using the OEM rear sets would be necessary to get this all bolted up. That is for OEM rear sets only. Strong possibility, once again, if you have aftermarkets, the shift rod length differs from stock. So the first place to begin is going to be with a measurement. Come on out to the bike. Let's take a look at it, and let's make an assumption right now that there are 10 millimeters of threads inside of each heim joint. That is going to put this shift rod at about 150 millimeters in total length. Now the shift sensors themselves, you can bank on this for about 50 millimeters in total length. The sensor itself is longer than that. You'll see that this is actually more like 64 millimeters. But remember, you have the distance you would thread the rod into the sensor. Best practice with amount of threads inside a heim joint or inside this sensor, I really don't like to go any less than about 8 millimeters, which is going to be right about here. Okay, so just get a sense for that. To me, that would be my bare minimum in order to know that I have enough integrity that the thing's just not going to pull apart over time. So, you know the length of this is going to be basically 50, and that's counting on this threading in there somewhere in the 10 millimeter-ish range. Look at the Dynojet shift rods. We have a full kit that has all of them in one, and we have them each listed individually. Once you've taken your measurement and you understand how your heim joints are set up on your bike, you're able to choose the appropriate one for your motorcycle. In the case of this R3, the option that was going to work best for me is going to be rod G with this sensor. From here, we need to remove this shift rod that's on the bike currently. We're going to need these 2 jam nuts. One is right-hand thread, one is left-hand thread, so that we're able to reuse those on this application. It's also important to note that the shift sensor is right-hand thread, right-hand female, as well as right-hand male. Okay, now we're just going to jump into it. First thing I'm going to do, I'm going to loosen up the jam nuts on the shift rod we have on the bike. Once I've done that, we're going to go ahead and I'm just going to take the hind joint off of the shift pedal itself. I will leave, for now, the knuckle on the selector shaft of the trans. Once I get that all off, just go ahead and thread it out. Leave that hind joint there on the knuckle. Here is our left-hand thread hind joint. Okay, we're going to need this, as well as this one here. And let's take a measurement of this shift rod to see how accurately I guessed. That's pretty darn accurate. That's 150 millimeters right there. And we did have, like I said, a lot of threads inside the hind joints. So now let's begin mocking up the Dynojet sensor. In order for this to work properly on the R3, especially considering that we may, in time, want to flip this to GP shift, we have to install the sensor right here on this hind joint. This is the right-hand threaded hind joint, so we're really locked into that without replacing any hind joints, which you wouldn't want to do. So the sensor is going to be installed in this manner right here. In the case of this R3, I already know that it's going to be tight for me on shift rod length, okay? So I've got 10 mil available here. I'm going to need a little bit of this length. So I'm going to scale this down to about 8, okay? And thread that in. And I also want to make sure the wiring harness is routed like this. I want the harness to be up. So I'm going to thread that in. Run the jam nut down. I'm going to go ahead and tighten this one up now because this has to remain in this position. Also very important to note that I want to make sure that I have this harness basically straight up and down once I've got everything tightened. So I'm going to go ahead and I'm going to adjust this just a couple times to get that as close to that position as possible. I like that right there. Okay, this jam nut's tight. We're good to go there now. Jam nuts. Just going to run those all the way on. Left-hand thread is here, and this is where that hind joint's going to go. Okay, now once again, considering the fact that I know that shift rod length-wise, man, it's pretty tight for me, what I'm going to do is I'm going to get this down to that minimum number where I'm most comfortable, right? I really hate to go past that. I mean, I've gone 5 before and had good results with it, but I really prefer to have as many threads in there as possible. Because I already know Max is going to be super pumped up with this quick shifter, and he's going to be stomping on this thing, and you want to make sure it's able to hold up to all that abuse. Okay. Left-hand thread over here. It's just finger tight now. We're right-hand thread here. Let's raise this up, see where we're at. Another option would be to add threads to this. If you had a die, right, that you felt sharp enough to do this, you could add more threads to this and then shorten the rod itself by about 50 millimeters. I don't think that's a realistic option for most riders out there, so we're going to focus on the parts that we have available to get this done. Go ahead and snug that back up. And knowing how Max rides, realistically, that's pretty much it. That's where he likes it in terms of shifter position. Now I want to double check clearance over here and make sure that we don't have any conflicts with the rear sets. And every set of rear sets could be different. You know, if I had these Vortex rear sets mounted up other than they are right now, this, like if I had this hole right here down lower, it's going to be really close to that shift sensor, okay? It's going to push this down a little bit, but still that could create a little bit of a conflict. Where we're at, this looks good, the clearance looks good. Now we need to tighten up the jam nuts. And there's a little trick that I like to use here, and we're going to talk about the angle between the shift rod and the shift pedal and the shift knuckle, because this is also very critical for smooth shifting. Okay, now we're going to focus on the jam nuts. Let's start over here on the shift sensor side. There's a wrench flat on this sensor right here. Okay, I push that boot back that holds the wiring harness just a little bit, very, very gently. That allows me to hold the sensor, because the sensor will spin on the rod, okay? And then with the backup wrench in place, and go ahead and snug that jam nut. So now that one's good to go. We're also going to talk about the relationship of these two Heim joints with one another. When you tighten this up, and we already know that to torque it, we need to rotate in this direction. If you have the Heim joints in opposing directions, it could cause this to bind, and it's going to cause more force needed in order to shift, and we certainly don't want that. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to rotate this Heim joint there. I'm going to rotate the other one in the same direction before I snug anything up. I'm just going to hold them. Go ahead and snug this, like so. And when you're done, I want you to rotate your shift rod like this. You should be able to turn this back and forth, showing you clearly that the Heim joint is able to move very freely on that ball and socket stud. Okay, no tension there whatsoever. Also, 90-degree relationship between your shift knuckle and your shift pedal, okay? That is where the most mechanical advantage is. That is the heart and soul of smooth shifting. Okay, now with the sensor that I chose to use on this bike, the wiring harness, right, it's not running forward, it just can't. So I need to secure this to the sensor itself. I don't want to pull it too tight in this direction. You want to give it the ability to move around a little bit, okay? So I'm going to leave just a little bit of a hoop in it, like that. Snug that up. And then as we route this onto the bike, we want to make sure that we do have additional points where we're able to secure this, okay? Another one that I can use here, and we could go on the back side of the shift knuckle. And you need to leave enough length that you won't have any issues at all with it being pulled and possibly damaging itself, okay? I'm not going to tighten this one up, I'm just going to get it started. And look at everything you got going on here and make sure that you see right what I'm talking about right there. Just having enough that you're able to flex it without any issues. Once you've done that, and this is how it would look on the R3. Every bike's a little bit different, okay? So take the time with your motorcycle to make sure that as you go through this, you're going to get the best possible clearance, best possible results. Okay, this part is only going to be applicable if you're using the dual contact sensor. If you're not, you're only going to have one connector to choose from. It's going to be really simple. The way this sensor is set up, this harness comes out of it directionally, so it should be pointing that way, okay? The way we had to install it on the R3, we had to flip it, so that's just not possible. Okay, so think about it like this. With that wire pushing towards the front of the motorcycle, if you are pushing when you shift, which would mean this, like Max would be, then the red and blue wires would be used. If you would be pulling when you shift, you would use the green and blue. Well, in our case, this is flipped. Okay, instead of the wiring being forward, well, it's coming out back. Our installation simply dictated that with the dual contact sensor. So for the R3, with these rear sets, we will in fact be using the green-blue, the pull, because when he does shift up, it's pushing, but the sensor is flipped. So we'll just go ahead and plug that in, and we'll begin to route this so it's completely out of the way. You can see we've got a little cable tie here from some other work we had done. We're going to go ahead and cut that out of there. We'll use a couple of cable ties and then put the sprocket cover back on. Okay, now the harness. Let's just go ahead and just feed that up into the frame of the bike. Make sure that we're going to have plenty of length to get to that power commander. That all looks good. Now here's where you need to settle on your routing. What's going to work best for you on this bike? You know, we're still currently using the sprocket cover. Some riders have eliminated that by now, so let's get this all mocked up and see, you know, how is that going to work with our current configuration. And you want to make sure that you don't have any conflicts, any possible damage, you know, like that. You could run that wire right through there, like so. Bolt that down. Okay, if you're not using a sprocket cover, then it's going to be just real simple, you know, cable tie scenario. Okay, so once again, maintaining just a certain degree of slack down here. I want to cable tie this, and I also want to be able to get to this in the future without too much drama, which looks like we will be able to do where it's landing right now. Drop a cable tie here. Let's double check our length. Everything looks good. You know, this is the kind of situation where a little extra length down there just reduces the possibility of there being any damage from being, you know, overly stressed. Okay, sprocket cover is installed. You can see where I've got that secured, so we can really easily access that at the track, no problem. And double check everything here. And there's literally just enough clearance for this to all work as designed. If we had to, if we needed to pull this a little further forward, we could always rotate this one notch, one spline. You know, we'd be a little off 90. It wouldn't be really a big deal to manage if we had to do that. But in this case, we're good to go. It'd be trouble-free shifting. From this point, we need to make the connections at the power commander and then get the power commander itself enabled for quick shift. Okay, now that we have the sensor installed on the bike, you can see the harness is all routed. It's real nice. We showed you that, right? We've already covered that. The toughest part of this whole job, it's right down here. It's determining what you need, getting it all in there, getting it dialed in, maintaining those 90-degree angles between the shift knuckle and then, of course, the shift pedal. You need that leverage for smooth shifting, okay? Now, connecting it to the power commander realistically is not very difficult. Here is the termination of the harness as it comes from Dynojet. You can see they already have these tinned too, which is really nice. That's just the right way to do it. So we need to get the power commander off the bike so that we can go ahead and hook up the quick shift sensor. Like so. I've taken the waterproof connector cover off so that we're able to do this. Looking at the instructions, they have you installing these in ports 3 and 4, working from left to right. Per the instructions, it also notes that it doesn't matter which wire you put in which hole. Either one can go in either hole, it'll work just fine. Okay, now to get this done, you'll have to have a small flat-bladed screwdriver. Loosen this up enough so we can get the wire in there. And remember, we're working on number 3 and 4 from left to right. You need a really small flat blade screwdriver. Okay, now we'll go ahead and insert them in. I'm going to go one at a time. You can see now that's pretty flush with the unit itself. I like that a little bit better. So I'm going to hold that. You don't need a crazy amount of torque here, it's just enough so that it's seated and it's going to make a good connection. We'll do the other side. Once we've done both wires, we'll go ahead and put that weatherproof cover back on. Put that in there. Just gotta double check the first one again. As with any of this stuff, you really want to take your time, double check, triple check. We're trying to improve the bike, not create any future issues. All right, that feels good. Let's go ahead and put this back on. Okay, we need to leave this out now because we need to enable the quick shifter using their software. So we have to connect the module to my laptop using the supplied USB cord when you got the Power Commander. Okay, we've got the laptop all hooked up to the Power Commander. Everything's powered up, we're good to go. Let's come over to Power Commander Tools, Configure, Feature Enables and Input Selections. Come over here to Quick Shifter. Let's enable it. You can click on the Configure button if you want to and go through and check everything. We're going to leave that, okay? We're not going to change any of the stock settings with this. Go ahead and come back here and click OK. It's applying the settings now. And that should enable your quick shifter. Come back here and you can see in the feature selections it is in fact enabled now. Next step is to put the bodywork back on the bike to test ride it and make sure that everything is functional. We're not going to get into any advanced tuning options or any advanced setup with the quick shifter. It's been my experience that most oftentimes the stock settings from Dynojet work really well for most applications. You can really open yourself a big can of worms by trying to tamper with that yourself, by trying to modify that on your own. If you're going to take it into a known tuner that has a lot of experience with certain bikes, absolutely. If they recommend making changes, make those changes. Or if when riding you're not getting what you expect out of it, you're having issues with the quick shifter itself, then you're going to want to make changes. Do your research. Don't be afraid to contact Dynojet. Or if you're going to have a custom tune done, the tuner should absolutely be able to get that all dialed in for you. Okay, I took the bike for a little test drive. You see I threw the seat on it. I just took it out, back here in the parking lot, close course of course, to make sure that this worked. It works fine. Now we'll take it to the racetrack this weekend with Sportbike Track Time for our final test. My son Max will ride it. My expectations are this is going to work great. It's really important to note, in order to get this to work, everything starts with the Power Commander 5. You have to have that on the bike. The R3 in particular, you don't need any additional pieces except for the quick shift sensor. And then of course the labor to install it, you enable it with their tuning software, okay? Every bike's different. Some bikes you might need a quick shifter expansion module. Some you might need an ignition module and a Power Commander. So each one is different. We try to really tailor our listings on our website for the most common sport bikes to your bike and show you a list of things you'll need. It's also very important, the stuff I showed you with the shift rod, don't forget that. Measure multiple times before you order your parts so you don't create any issues. I'll recap too, these angles right here, 90 degrees, baby. That is where all the mechanical advantages, smooth shifting, make sure the plane that the heim joints are on is even. And now the wiring on this, I had to get a little creative with this dual contact sensor because I needed the wire to roll back this way. And you can see I took off the little booty, I slid it over, I got a couple of zip ties on here, and I made sure I have perfect clearance in between the rear sets and the shifter. I also had to loosen up the shift knuckle and adjust that a little bit to help change this distance. So patience, creativity will get you a great end result. There is nothing more fun than having that bike wide open and just stepping on that shifter and just letting all that magic happen as you go from gear to gear. I'm Brian Van, sportbiketrackgear.com.